We all ready down there? Good to go. Okay. We'll go ahead and call this Tooele City Planning Commission meeting to order this Wednesday, March 13th, 2024 at the hour of 7 p.m. here at the City Council Chambers. First item on our agenda tonight is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you all please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Number 2 is our roll call. Commissioner Hammer?
Here.
Commissioner Proctor? Here. Commissioner Robinson? Here. Commissioner Jensen?
Here.
Commissioner Anderson?
Here.
Please excuse Commissioners Dunn and Sloan. We have Council Members Hanson and Manzione, Staff Members Agard, Hall, and Baker, and please excuse Staff Member Hanson. Number 3 on our agenda tonight is a public hearing and decision. It is a consideration of a request by Marcosian Auto for approval of conditional use permit to allow an accessory vehicle storage yard on property located at 1232 West Utah Avenue in the LI Light Industrial Zoning District. Mr. Hall.
Thank you. This is an interesting application, new part of our code to review tonight, and so just to go over a few things with you. This is the property, Marcosian Auto. They've been interested for a while in an accessory vehicle storage yard. We have code that allows that now under certain circumstances. This is the property you can see here. There's an existing building there where they have sales and service happening currently. They'd like to add the accessory vehicle storage to the rear of the property. It is in the light industrial zone, as you said. That's one of the zones where that conditional use was allowed or was added in the recent ordinance change. Just a couple of things to note for the record. The property itself, the yellow part here that you can see, that this should have been in your packets as well. This is the part that would be fenced and paved to allow for that accessory vehicle storage. The new code allowance for accessory vehicle storage says you can have it as long as you have sales in these certain zones, and this is one of those zones. A couple of things to note. The requirements for this kind of storage. The vehicles have to be associated with that sales. Marcosian is currently offering sales and service there. That must be temporary in nature, so none of the vehicles should be there more than 120 days. It does need to be fenced, at least with minimum 6-foot solid fencing, and ordinance has allowances for metal, for masonry, for other solid fencing like that. It does have to be paved with either concrete or asphalt, and there's an area limit, no more than 20%. What the applicants are proposing here represents about 8% of the property overall, so it does meet that part of the code. They're proposing to pave it and to fence it. The paving will need to be reviewed by our city engineer to make sure that the drainage is handled appropriately, etc. But this is the area you can see where they would like to do that outdoor vehicle storage, and this is the kind of fencing that they're proposing to put around it. Theirs would be 8-foot and metal, solid fence. It does meet those requirements, or can meet those requirements. Right now it doesn't exist yet, so those are the conditions of approval that we've recommended. And again, that the engineering division will review that paved area to make sure that it drains properly, and so our groundwater and soils are protected. Do you have any questions for staff at this point?
Let's bring it back to the commission for questions. Sounds pretty straightforward. You planned this one pretty well.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Hall.
Thank you much.
This one does require a public hearing, so I'll go ahead and open the public hearing now. If you'd like to speak to this particular item, please approach the podium. State your name for the record, and we'll have you write your name for the record. Seeing no one approach, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing, bring it back to the commission for further action.
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the conditional use permit requested by Marcosian Auto to allow accessory vehicle storage yard based on the conditions and subject to the findings listed in the staff report dated 8 March 2024.
I got a motion to approve from Commissioner Robinson. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
And a second from Commissioner Jensen. Commissioner Hammer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Proctor?
Aye.
Commissioner Robinson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson?
Aye.
I am Chairman Hamilton. I also vote aye. This one passes 6-0. Number 4 on our agenda is a review and decision. This is a consideration of request for a preliminary subdivision plan approval for the Betty Jean Skinner Johnson Trustee Subdivision located at 105 East, 1000 North in the R17 and RR5 zoning districts. Mr. Hall.
Thank you. So this application wins our contest for the longest subdivision name. They were going to try to add 2 more names, but they couldn't find anything else in the family names to include there. A lot of family members that have inherited this property, and it's going to be part of this subdivision now. So 105 East, 1000 North. This is the property. Just to give you a precursor, you can see from there, there's a home right here. I don't know if any of you were able to drive by and see. It's a nice home right here. They want to keep that home, and basically this subdivision, to give you the nickel tour of it, carves that piece out and keeps that garage there, but that barn building will go. It carves a piece out so they can keep that. That part of the property's already been rezoned to R17 a number of months ago. The rest of the property is in the RR1 zone, and that's why you see those 2 zones listed there. The total acreage is, well, let's get the right numbers so we tell you the right thing. It only shows the RR1, but our zoning map is being updated. Most of the property remains in that RR1 zone for future development after it's sold off. And just this one little corner, this is the full plat there, but I wanted to zoom in for you just to show that little lot 2 right there. Just about 20,000 square feet, and the remainder is all in that other parcel for future development. That RR1 could be a rezone in the future, we don't know yet. This is right now, they're just carving out the piece to make sure they keep that home intact. There's a little bit of a dedication along 1000 North to get the sidewalk and park strip in. And just as a side note, we're actually going to do the park strip and curb and gutter sidewalk along the adjoining property as well. Right now, we've talked to them about getting a dedication done. So it's not part of the subdivision, but we're going to get that. So there'll be full sidewalk all the way down from the fire station, where the new fire station is being built, all the way to the corner. It is a standard subdivision because it does have that little dedication. It has to come to you for preliminary approval. After this, if the Planning Commission grants preliminary approval for this plan, we'll mop up any details and get a plat ready for recordation in staff. So you won't have to see it again. It doesn't go on to the City Council. This is your option tonight to look at it. So if there's any questions or anything, we're happy to answer them. We do have just a few comments to meet, but mostly the kinks have been worked out as we've been working through the preliminary plan with staff. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them for you.
All right, let's bring this back to the commission for any questions or comments for staff. Making our jobs easy tonight. All right, with no questions for staff, I'll entertain a motion on this.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion.
Commissioner Jensen.
I move we approve the preliminary subdivision plan request for Betty Jean Skinner Johnson trustee subdivision application number P24-31 based on the findings and subject to the conditions listed in the staff report dated March 8th, 2024.
I got a motion to approve from Commissioner Jensen. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
And a second from Commissioner Proctor. Commissioner Hammer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Proctor?
Aye.
Commissioner Robinson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson?
Aye.
I am Chairman Hamilton. I also vote aye. That one passes 6-0. Moves us on to number 5 on our agenda, City Council reports.
Hello, everyone. Report from our, that is really loud tonight, report from our last meeting. We did pass the ordinance on the lithium-ion battery storage as written, and we imposed some fees for the fire department. We've never had those before, so it's going to help our fire department, like in the inspections and setting up new businesses and stuff. I think it's a good thing. And then we talked in our work meeting, had a first little look about a proposed amendment to some code in the parking lot sections regarding landscaping islands. So that will be moving forward.
Interesting.
About all I have, unless you have something for me.
Got any questions for
I have a
council?
question about
Yeah.
the land. Is that to put in more landscaping
No,
islands or
it's to
less?
define the code better.
Oh,
It's
just
kind
the
of confusing.
definitions, okay.
Yeah, definitions mostly,
Okay.
so. Yeah. End caps versus something else.
Versus islands.
Versus islands, yeah.
Yes.
He was there. Yeah.
Perfect.
Anything else? Okay.
Sweet, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moves us to number 6 on our agenda is a review and approval for the Planning Commission minutes for the meeting held on February 28, 2024. Are there any corrections or additions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes as written.
Got a motion to approve from Commissioner Proctor. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I got a second from Commissioner Hammer. Commissioner Hammer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Proctor?
Aye.
Commissioner Robinson?
Aye.
Commissioner Jensen?
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson?
Aye.
I am Chairman Hamilton. I also vote aye. That one passes. Moves us on to number 7 on our agenda is our training, is a discussion of missing middle housing by Mr. Baker.
Scrolling.
I'll put on the agenda for next week. Or next meeting.
Mr. Chairman, as we wait, is there a need that our minutes taker remain in the meeting the entire time while we receive training?
Unless she wants to take minutes on training, no?
Because we don't need minutes on training, right?
Nope.
Correct. That's what I went back to
Oh,
speak with her
excellent.
about. She was a trooper and stayed for the presentation at the city council meeting, and I've suggested she can just indicate that I gave the same training I did to the council on March 6th and be done with it.
Thank you.
She's welcome to stay, but I don't
Exactly.
think she needs to.
But it could be an hour. She will never get back. In a nice way, Roger.
Okay, I hope this volume is okay. It seems to be all right. I am excited to talk with you tonight about the concept of missing middle housing, and thank you for enduring it twice, council members, and Andrew. Spared Catherine here. So about 6 months ago, I went to the annual convention of the Utah League of Cities and Towns, and they have one of their full days is planning-related topics, and a lot of planning commissioners go and attend those sessions. The keynote speaker for one of our days was Daniel Paralek, who wrote the book called Missing Middle Housing. In fact, he invented the term, he defined the term, and he has mounted a national campaign to help people understand what it is and why it's important. I didn't know what missing middle housing was, and so in order to talk to you about it, I tried to find a short definition, and I'll show you a couple of slides right from their website. The missing middle housing types provide diverse housing options such as duplexes, fourplexes, cottage courts, and multiplexes. These house-scale buildings fit seamlessly into existing residential neighborhoods, and he's talking about single-family residential neighborhoods. And so they provide options along the spectrum of affordability from the very affordable to the, well, we're getting on the upper end of affordable. But I highlighted what I think are the most important words, that all of these missing middle buildings are house scale. Some of them are on the scale of small houses, some of them are on the scale of larger houses, and some of them very large houses. But the key is that they are all buildings that would fit in their single-family neighborhood where they're built. It's just that they would hold more than one family. He calls it missing because these types of housing products have typically been illegal since the 1940s. And as we'll talk tonight, they are almost all illegal in Tooele City under our current zoning codes. It's not that we don't like them, it's that we haven't experienced them for 85 years. And call them middle because they sit in the middle on the spectrum of housing, with single-family houses on the one end of the spectrum and large urban high-rise multifamily buildings on the other end of the spectrum. We don't even have that far end of the spectrum in Tooele, although we have large apartment projects. We don't have any 8-story residential towers, and we may not ever. That isn't the point. The point is that there's a spectrum of housing types, and these in the middle are mostly missing from communities today. This is his graphic that's on the cover of the book. you may have noticed. And you see the single family on the left end of the spectrum and the large multifamily on the right end of the spectrum. And everything in between is what he calls missing middle. You'll see duplexes on the far left, and we transition to fourplexes and other types of creative, beautiful housing that we don't typically have here, all the way up to the larger house-scale buildings. Admittedly, some of them are quite large, but they're still not sprawling complexes of units. It's a single building that houses multiple people. I like this quote directly from the book itself. This is, I think, the most important thing I gleaned from the book, which is, it's an excellent book, by the way, is that we're looking at the form and the scale of the buildings, not the number of the units. We're less concerned about density when we have this discussion of housing than we are the form and the scale. How big in relation to its neighbors? What does it look like? How does it function? And it's all house scale. So we wouldn't drop a 12-plex apartment building in between two small single-family houses. That's the wrong scale. The idea here is to create multifamily housing that's in the same scale as single-family housing, so it all fits and looks good together. So for this discussion, I've put a blue box around the housing types or forms that I want to be looking at tonight. We have a lot of townhouses in Tooele now, but as you noticed, the townhouses shown on this missing middle graphic are really not the townhouses we have in Tooele. In Tooele, we're getting the longer rows of townhouses of attached units. These are large house-scale structures, and the ownership of them is divided up into townhouses inside that one building. So they look and function quite differently than the side-by-side townhouses that we're used to seeing. Density can be a scary word. It's a scary word for a lot of people. A lot of city councils, a lot of planning commissions, a lot of staff, and a lot of residents and citizens, the public. But I'm going to suggest that it doesn't have to be, not because it isn't legitimately scary for people. I respect those reactions. It's just that this type of housing doesn't focus on the density. It's really not our concern. Our true concern is, how does this development look, work, and feel? What is the form? How does it look? What is the function? How does it work in relation to the street, in relation to each other as neighbors, in relation to the open space? And how does it feel when you're a resident or a visitor and you walk out your front door in your missing middle development? Are you going to exit the third floor and walk down a steel staircase outside the building and not see or know anyone and exit onto the parking lot? I'm not judging it, I'm just contrasting it to how it could feel when you walk out of your house and you immediately see your neighbor's front door, front porch, and the common space in between. There are different ways to do density. So density does not equal affordability. It is not true that the more dense you get, the cheaper you get. It depends on the market and what's built. So if the market is a high demand for a low supply, it can be terrible product at a high price. It just depends on the market. And so density also doesn't necessarily mean good design. So if we get away from the density concern and focus instead on what it is, what do we want to see, and not worry about how many families live in it, because we love how it looks, we love how it works, and we love how it feels, why are we worried that there's 2 or 4 or 8 families living in it? That's the idea. Again, I'm not judging it. I'm just suggesting that we shift perspective to other priorities as we evaluate developments. So tonight I want to show you several types of missing middle housing. I'll be showing you the ones that are in color, just because those are ones I have good examples of, and we've already talked about the townhouses. And a triplex is the same as a fourplex, just one has 3 and one has 4. So we'll group those together for now. Looking at the duplex, this is called a side-by-side duplex. Not a new concept. You see them all over the place. But what you see here is a single building that is in the scale of a fairly large house. It has 2.5 stories. We call it a half because it's under this gabled roof and it's not a true complete 3rd story. So that's a 2.5-story building. You can see the entries on either side and the dividing line running right up the middle, but it still has a pleasing form, and it functions well with a porch, and you're presented to a common space, and you have similar neighboring functions. So this is not fancy. It's not a lot different from what you might see in many neighborhoods. But this is not allowed in Tooele City. A duplex in Tooele City requires precisely twice the land as a single-family home. So in an R17 district, you have to have 7,000 square feet for a single-family home, and you have to have 14,000 square feet for a duplex. That was because of a historic fear of densities, and we wanted to make sure that we kept that larger lot, even though it's relatively small. On our scale of zoning, 7,000 is big in a lot of municipalities. So perhaps you and the council would like to see a zoning regulation that would allow this type of wonderful product. Perhaps. I'm just saying these are things to think about. This is another example. It looks even more on the scale of a single house, but again, it's divided right up the middle and with 2 entry doors in the front. If it weren't for the 2 doors in the front, you wouldn't know it's a duplex. So the form is in the scale of a single-family house, and it functions very well like a single-family house, and it feels pleasant when you come out onto the porch. You might see your neighbor, but it's not so fancy. It's just a little different way of thinking. Oh, and that's also a 2.5-story house. This is a 2-story house. This one is not a side-by-side duplex. It's a stacked duplex with one unit on top of the other. So one of these doorways opens onto a staircase that goes to the 2nd floor. And it very much looks like one house. It just happens to be 2. And another example. They're adorable, charming, and historic. These are not new products. These are older products. And we don't allow any of these in Tooele City. I'm not judging it. I'm just saying if you want this, we would have to make some changes. I wanted to show you this from the book because the book not only shows pictures and lists housing types, but it actually provides the zoning regulations that you need for each of these types of housing. The side-by-side duplex, the stacked duplex, the side-by-side triplex, the stacked triplex, and on down the spectrum, he provides everything. So let's look at these just for what they represent. You see a difference between front-loaded and rear-loaded. Front-loaded simply means there's a driveway. You pull off the street into the driveway and drive back to your garage. Rear-loaded simply means that there's no driveway. You drive down an alley and pull right off the alley into your garage. And so you'll notice that the lot area is smaller for a rear-loaded lot only because you don't have to accommodate a driveway. Those are things that we would debate here in Tooele if we wanted to look at some of these, whether an alley would even work, because in an alley you have to plow it, but there's no place to put the snow. So you'd have to design around some of those challenges. but I'm just helping you understand what this is showing. So the best way to control the size of the house is to control the size of the lot. So if you want to restrict the size of the building to a house scale building, and you see on the right column a building, they suggest restricting the building to a range of 28 feet to 55 feet. The best way to do that is to limit the width of the lot, so that if your lot is 40 feet wide, you don't build a 55-foot wide house. So the lot width and the building width go together every time, and the lot depth and the building depth go together. And then it has a range of lot size, and you notice it starts from 4,500 square feet, which would be a fairly small house, to 10,000 square feet, which could accommodate a much larger house. So density isn't ignored, it's just not the focus. If you look at the second table with the word units at the top, you can see that these are duplexes, 2 units. And the net density or gross density is just all of the land, not subtracting anything. And you could get 13 or 14 units to the acre of duplexes that would look like what you saw. And so if that's a product you like, when you can put that many homes on an acre that are well-designed, good form, good function, and they feel pleasing, you want to live there, you like living there, then we're just not as concerned about the density because the project works. If it were bad design and you hated living there because it's so badly designed and it didn't function well, then yeah, you'd be concerned about that density. So that's why I say let's focus on the form and worry less about how many units. Parking is something we can't avoid and can't ignore. It's been a challenge in Tooele for multifamily housing. It's a challenge in every community, and we'd have to tackle it. The book recommends in some areas no parking. But when you look at the context of the area, it works, either because there's a parking structure or you have a boulevard that people can park on. But he always recommends, as you see, 1 parking space per acre off-site, and then he lets you count the street. So we would have to study that and see if the street provided enough on-street parking to accommodate the units. And in some cases it would, in some cases it wouldn't. You can't put a 10-story building on a block and tell everyone to park on the street because there just isn't room. But you can find a balance where if you have some on-site and some on-street, you can find a balance where it works. I'm not saying this is it. I'm saying we would have to debate it and figure it out with good help over here and support from the council. So setbacks you're familiar with.
Wait,
This,
Roger,
yeah,
are you taking questions like as we go?
anytime.
So the parking, like, I don't know where this fellow lives, but in Utah, we get a lot of snow.
Right.
How would on-street parking work if that's what we decided would be best? Where do you put the snow then when everyone's on the street? Because I live on a street like that right now.
Right. Well,
That's terrible.
that's a great question. I think the answer can be simple. You just say, all of our missing middle lots are front-loaded. They all have to have driveways, and the garages have to be in the back, so they have to be long driveways that can fit a lot of cars, and you're done.
Because we couldn't, I don't know, maybe we couldn't, but would we ever say that it's all street parking? Because I see on the 411 where people are like, I can't not park on the street. I don't physically have a place for my vehicle.
Right.
We wouldn't want to create more of that,
We
ever.
wouldn't. That's why this has to be a piece that fits with all the other pieces. And I would never come to you and say, let's imagine an ideal where no one needs to drive a car. We're all walking everywhere we go. It's not reality. We have to plan for reality, and we will. Mostly I showed you this to show you that even though we're not focusing on the density. It's still a zoning regulation. We still have setbacks, lot widths, building heights, parking requirements. It just has a different focus, a different objective. With a density zone like MR16, the objective is to reach the maximum unit count on an acre. And that's the only measure there is. We don't care what it looks like or how it works. Now, in a multifamily district, we do have design guidelines, so it's not that we don't care. It's just, it would be, the design would become more of the focus than the density, and I don't need to keep repeating that. I just wanted you to see that every housing type in this book already has the zoning parameters, and we don't have to invent it from nothing. We still have to find out where they would fit in our community. That's a whole different study. Looking at an example of a triplex, these are stacked triplexes. You see that most of the block is stacked triplexes, although all the buildings are different. And their house scale, fairly large house, but they're still one structure that accommodates multiple units, and they look great. They have character. We'd have to ask the people how it feels, but this is just showing you that this housing exists and has existed for a long time, and we can do it if we want, but we can't do this today in Tooele. An example of a multiplex. This could be an apartment or a townhouse building, but it's a large-scale, single house scale building on the larger end, but it might fit 10, 12 units depending on how deep it is. I can't tell. These could be for rent or ownership as condos or townhouses or apartments. And this would fit in some neighborhoods, it wouldn't fit in others. Here's another example. It really does kind of look like two buildings attached to each other, and that's okay. It's still not out of scale for lots of single-family buildings. But that might have 8 or 10 units in it. A lot of these may not function wonderfully because when you leave this, you step right out onto the street. So it's an example, but it might not be an ideal. It's just a different way to do it. I'll show you some examples later that I think are more of an ideal, starting with the courtyard buildings. This is a larger house scale building, 2 stories, but as you see, the shape of the building surrounds an interior common space that we call a courtyard. And so none of these units face onto the road. When you walk out of your front door, you don't walk out onto the street. You walk into the common space of your development that is close to the street but separate. There's even a wall there, and all of the units face each other also. So it might have a more pleasing feel and a better function because of the ability to interact with neighbors and what you see.
Roger, could specifically the multiplex in these courtyards, could that be built in Tooele under current codes like where we have apartment buildings now? If builders or people decided to use that density to build this kind of product?
This one you probably could.
Okay.
Yeah, great question. I'll say probably because we haven't looked at it yet.
Right.
Like we just did with the Harris Elementary, yeah.
Guess what? We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Here's another example that I think is really beautiful. It's not a sophisticated, gorgeous common space. It's not exotic, but it's there. And when you leave your unit, you see the other units and your central green space where you can gather or not. And you're not living right on the street. So I like this model for the form and the function of it and the feel. This is my favorite model that we do not allow or could not do in Tooele City. today for a number of reasons in our zoning code just doesn't allow it. This is called what I call the cottage court. It's a similar concept to the courtyard building, but instead of a single building with a central common space, this is several smaller structures close together fronting the central common space. You see the cottages are 1.5 stories in this example. The central space is fairly small, but in proportion to the project. It's not enormous and it's not tiny. It seems to be a good balance. Plus the form of the porches where when you walk out of your door, you're going to wave to your neighbors instead of watch the car scream by. So this, I think I put some zoning regs on this. Yeah, I did. Here's another example of the cottage court. Whether we like it or not, it's just an example of how someone else decided to do it. If we did it here, we would decide how we wanted to do it. Again, all these units face inward toward the community. So it's easier to make it a community instead of just a building. So I wanted to show you the zoning regulations in the book for this. And you see that the density could be up to 20 or 30 units an acre. With those small cottage houses. And what's objectionable about how those look and function and feel? I don't know that I see any objection to how it look, the form and the function and the feel of that. It just works. So it doesn't mean that's right for us. It means it's a different paradigm, a different model that we could look at. Now, this is an example of a cottage court development in Utah right now in Harriman, and our own Tooele resident, Michael Malloy, is the community development director in Harriman, and this is a project he solicited, found the developer, helped design the project because they wanted something different. Now, you'll notice I put upper missing middle. Upper doesn't mean better, upper means bigger and more expensive. It's on the upper end of that spectrum. This may not work in Tooele, and that's fine. It's just an example of how one community is doing it. So you see the units surrounding the central common space. This is quite a bit different than the cottage court we looked at a minute ago, because these houses are much larger. The central open space is much larger. It's not right or wrong. It's probably not affordable. In fact, I know that these are selling for about $650,000 a piece, but that is significantly below the median house price of $850,000 in that valley. So the building on the end is a duplex. So it is house scale, but each side is fairly large. Now, this is a triplex right in the middle. Again, they're pretty big houses. I'm not saying this is the ideal, I'm saying it's just another example. This is also a duplex. One of them fronts the street, one of them fronts the common space. Now, mostly I just wanted to show that other communities are thinking along these lines and doing interesting things. Daybreak, of course, has a lot of missing middle types that I haven't focused on. The book does. The book, half of the book is case studies of communities that have done this, all these types of housing in other parts of the country. Tells you how they work, tells you how they don't, and shows it all. A lot of good illustrations. I do want to talk about possibilities for Tooele City for a few minutes. If you and the City Council are interested in thinking about this and looking at how it might work in Tooele, this is one potential property. You recognize the old Harris Elementary School. This is the new Harris Community Village with their studio, higher density apartments in the back. Here's just another view of it. What I learned just a week ago is that They still have 3.5 acres of undeveloped land that would be ideal for a missing middle pilot project. Our zoning today won't let them do anything else on this property except a few single-family detached homes on 7,000 square foot lots. They didn't ask us to consider anything else because our code doesn't allow anything else. But when I told them we were having a discussion about this, they said this would be perfect for a form-based missing middle development. Now, I just dropped the term form-based on you. You've heard me say form enough tonight that you don't want to hear me say it again. And that's all I mean, form. The zoning district would focus on the form of the product that we want. That's why it's called form-based, instead of use-based or so right now in Tooele, you can't build multifamily in a single-family zone except for a duplex with a huge lot. And you can't build a single-family home in a multifamily zoning district. It's intentional. We did it that way on purpose. I recommended it. And I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying there are other options that may bring more units of a pleasing scale and a lower price range that would work on this. If you put a single-family house in there, it'll be a $350,000, $400,000 house. If you were to allow missing middle in there, it could cut those in half for twice as many families or more. So I would like you to think about the merits of giving it a try. And I had the same conversation with the city council. The risk is low because it's a very small property, and we have 2 larger apartment buildings right next to it. And it's close to Main Street, it's close to Newtown. So this might be a good way to have someone from the outside come and say, we would like to propose a form-based code to you that would result in this product for this many people, this many families. And we would say, we like this, we don't like that, we want that. And we would create a zoning district just for this property based on the scale of houses around, so that what we built was in the right scale and massing, so that you liked how it looked and you liked how it worked. We don't have to give these away or approve these if we don't like them. We get to decide what works and what we like. And of course, it'll be a collaboration with the designer and the owner. In this case, the owner is the Tooele County Housing Authority. They have the designer that prepared this drawing for me does almost exclusively missing middle housing projects in Salt Lake Valley, and they helped design this project. So they know what they're doing. They're really good at it. They're public-minded. Just give it some thought. If you would be open to trying something new on a small scale that could be exciting and provide greater inventory at lower cost for more families. We also have opportunities on Broadway in Newtown. This is a very small piece of land. It's from Vine Street to Utah Avenue with Broadway running down the middle. So it's really only 2 city blocks long and basically 1 block wide. Look at all that vacant land. It is ripe for something that works as missing middle. If you leave it to just single-family homes, there's nothing wrong with that. That's what we are and what we have. But it might fit 4 or 6 families. If you were to consider something that's more historically compatible with the neighborhood, then historically compatible, what I mean is that it's older neighborhoods like these that have had missing middle housing and would accommodate it, again, really well. The square on the upper middle that is lighter than the other vacant land is where the Broadway Hotel was. And Tooele City is hoping to acquire some of this property for fair prices based on what it is, which is vacant contaminated land, and make something really cool out of it before too long. Jared, I turned it off. I was pushing the wrong buttons. Let's see.
So on this form-based kind of idea, thought process,
Yeah.
would that also include mixed use, residential with maybe some commercial thrown in?
Absolutely it can, and often does, especially in these types of old commercial downtowns. Thanks. Stop pushing buttons from, hold the lectern and not push buttons, right? So, yeah, absolutely. It's very common in downtowns where we already allow ground floor retail. You know all about that. This would be perfect for ground floor retail or office with living above. And in fact, they call it, I just forgot the name, it's live work. So you could own the building and live and work all in the same building. You have your store or whatever, and you live on top. It's a very common old historical pattern in downtowns that we've lost. Daniel Paralek's company is called Opticos. They're very active in helping communities all across the country design missing middle housing. That's what they do. They're great at it. I showed you this slide only to show that they are an example of a company that does local pilot projects. They come to your community, you help together with you and the council, they identify a piece of land that we think would work with the owner, design a product that has the right form and function, and pass a code that would allow that to happen, and off you go. I'm not suggesting you use them. The group that did this is called the GIV Group, G-I-V Group. You can look up their website, that's the name of it. It's a nonprofit that is devoted to helping communities design and build quality missing middle housing. That's what they do. And it's, of course they make money, but it's not a for-profit company. It is a not-for-profit company, and they've spoken to the council once before with some exciting ideas. This slide tries to bring together the whole presentation, showing you what I would like to see our zoning focus more on, without saying it again. I've said it too many times. Showing you some of the product, showing you that there are zoning codes that would help you get that product, that housing type, and highlighting the term form-based code for you. I really respect Andrew and Jared for their planning knowledge and ability. I am a certified planner, so when I say that, I'm not bragging or comparing myself to them. They're a lot better at it. But I understand a lot of it. And I did not understand form-based codes forever, like 15 years. When I read this book, the light finally went on, and I understand that a form-based code is simply a zoning district that gets you the product, the end product that you want, as opposed to the end density that you allow. So, again, the book is Missing Middle Housing. This is my book. I would be very happy to let one of you take it and keep it for as long as you want, as long as you're reading it. If you don't like it, you can give it to another commissioner. We've got a couple other books in-house in the Community Development Department, and the council has copies. They're a little pricey, so we couldn't get them for all of you today, but we can look at getting some more. Chapter 2 there's a co-author, and I think it's just kind of a marketing thing. The co-author is a nationally known planning statistician, and he writes a chapter that is as dry as the salt flats in summer. I mean, I had a really hard time getting through it and understanding it, but it is science, and it's statistical science that justifies the economics of missing middle housing. And so there is value, just not to my brain. So I'm not suggesting you skip it, just be warned. Are there any other questions or comments or ideas? So I'm done.
I really like this aspect, especially in the Newtown area. It fits the mission and the vision of the Downtown Alliance and Main Street America as well. I'm just imagining the parties we could have up there to celebrate our history of that area. It could be
Yes.
huge. I think we need to do something. And that helps the affordable housing crisis, of course. You know?
Absolutely, that's the objective. And the history can be part of the form that you require.
Exactly. If we do it the right way, it could be perfect.
Yeah.
Roger, they all looked charming and nice. Like, how do you regulate that to a builder? Because what I see often is build it fast, build it cheap, and it's not super appealing. And could we ever get anything that looked similar to these? And not the historic part, not all brick and whatever, but
Absolutely. You could say that on this block of property, or half block, or quarter block, or whatever, we will allow side-by-side duplexes, 1.5 stories max, with a gabled roof, and a functional porch. And other things like lot width and depth, and there's your product. They can't do anything else. And it would be wildly popular, I think. And then you go to the next block. On this block, we'll allow side-by-side duplexes or stacked duplexes, and these are the rules for those. And then the next block, you might scale up to a fourplex. The next block, you might scale down from 2.5-story duplex to 1.5-story duplex, depending on what's next to
so
it.
you really could do it lot by lot.
Yes. Parcel by parcel, and you say, this is what we want this to look like. This is the product, the form that we want.
So
Thank you.
there's a city, and I won't mention the state, but it's actually a great city. They've taken an area like Broadway, and they've put this kind of housing on they did townhomes with the live work. So you had townhome live work on one side of the street, and then literally across the street, they had these cottage courtyards, and it's really a great product. That neighborhood is wildly popular. And the one thing that they don't deal with is snow, but I've seen that same kind of product in cities that
We could
deal
work
with
with
snow.
that. Okay, thank you.
Have any developers asked about this? I know it's not in our code, so probably not, but has anybody ever brought this to us?
Some developers have brought some interesting ideas to Andrew and Jared. They're not exactly like anything we've talked about tonight, but they're other creative ideas that they may be able to bring to you if it goes forward. But no.
Is there a market for it? So it completely shifts the paradigm from them coming to us and saying, this is what we want to do, to us going to them and saying, this is what we want you to do. And so are there businesses out there that can make an economic profit good enough for them to meet what we want them to do?
Yes. I'll give you more than just yes. So these kinds of projects are typically smaller infill type projects, so they don't get the attention of the D.R. Hortons and the Ivories of the world, which is, I know it's heartbreaking, but you're not going to get them looking at this. What you'll tend to get is the smaller developers who are looking for an opportunity to build more units on less property and appeal to a market that doesn't exist yet. And it would be unique in its form, and it would get the attention of the entire state like that. It just would. How did I find out about the Harriman one? Media. The whole development community is talking about it. So this would get a buzz going, and the minute one of these got approved and started to go up, you'd have people, you just would. You'd have people lining up, where can I do it? This is what I want to do. And we'd say, well, maybe. And we'd tell them what we want done if they want to get that approval. Because you're not ever required to approve a rezone. If a developer comes to you and say, I want to put a 14-plex apartment on this lot, you say, no, we're not going to zone it for that. But if the developer comes and says, I want to put a 14-unit cottage court on that lot, you might say, okay, let's talk. So I really do think there's huge potential here. It's great questions. All right, thank you very much. It's been really fun talking with you about it.
That was good.
Thanks, Roger.
Thank you, Roger. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right. If we've got nothing else, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to adjourn.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Any
Commissioner
takers? I got one. Jump.